Please, Drew, don't tell me you're still trying to live with that Series 5. Now listen, Frankie, there's not that many differences. It's still a very pretty, very capable watch that a lot of people can live with. Your S5 chip is way too slow. You don't get the blood oxygen level checking, nor do you have the 3rd generation heart rate sensor. What are we talking about? I thought you just liked the thinner bezels. Of course I like the thinner bezels. The display is so much bigger, and as we all know, bigger is better, right? I guess you're right, Frankie. Bigger is better. Therefore, you're better than me because you weigh 190 pounds and I weigh 183. You did not just go there. I'm just saying. You did not just go. Okay, I'm telling you, the scale's all off-centered because my steel watch weighs more than your ceramic 5, okay? I know, I find that weird. Even when you're going to the bathroom and taking a shower and stuff, you will not take off your watch, even when you're weighing yourself. I would never take it off because it's a part of me. Maybe you should just focus a little bit more on closing those rings and then... That's it. There's too much negativity. I'm done with you. That's enough. I guess his skin isn't as thick as my sapphire glass. Many of you are probably wondering why I want to compare the Series 5 to the Series 7. It's because, in my opinion, for most people thinking about buying an Apple Watch for their first time, or even maybe upgrading because you're still rocking a Series 4, 3, or 2, or some of you out there are still rocking the sports. My God. How do you do it? And in my opinion, other than the Apple Watch Ultra, which is essentially your only choice if your biggest reason to upgrade is just to get the most amount of battery possible, the Ultra is great. It's an amazing deal, and probably later this year they'll start offering them more in certified refurbished, and you can find them secondhand for cheaper. But yeah, if you just want the best possible watch in the world, I'm gonna go ahead and vote Apple Watch Ultra. But for many people, that's too expensive, or maybe the style is just not what they're comfortable with, which is why I've narrowed down these two Apple Watches, the 5 and the 7, which I think are the only ones worth considering. A lot of you may be wondering, well, Drew, why not the Apple Watch SE? What's wrong with the aluminum Apple Watches or the Series 8 or, you know, the recently dropped SE2? Why are you so insistent on these two Apple Watches? Well, it comes from many years of owning basically every single Apple Watch that has come out, and I've come to the conclusion, just based on my own experience and others' experiences, that I just cannot recommend people buy the aluminum watches. Not because of the aluminum, but because they always use the basic and cheap and very fragile Ion X glass. This glass is known for scratching very, very easily, and I've known so many people that have bought aluminum Apple Watches and then just a mere couple of months after buying them, they already notice all kinds of scuffs and scratches on that display. I've experienced it, and both the Series 5 and 7, even though neither of them are being sold by Apple right now, you can find them on other websites, some even new, for much lower prices, which are reasonable, and both of these watches have the sapphire glass. If you spec for a steel model or even a titanium model, with the Series 5, you can even go all the way up to ceramic, but as long as the watch essentially is not made of aluminum, it comes with that sapphire glass, which ages incredibly well, super durable, does not scratch, does not scuff, and even if you're buying them secondhand or used and that kind of thing, you'll typically find very, very little imperfections with the glass, and I think that will age much, much better because Apple Watches have kind of peaked, they've kind of reached their maturity, and now Apple's in that age of refinement where it's just a little bit better this, one new health sensor that. There's not huge upgrades to make from here on out, which is why most people I know don't upgrade their Apple Watch every year, and I see absolutely no problem with that because the differences generation over generation are so small. I think it makes a lot of sense to look towards the prior generations, and the Apple Watch Series 8 has so little differences between the Series 7, particularly if you're not a woman, which, because you're watching this channel, likelihood is you're not. There's almost zero advantages to going with a Series 8 over a Series 7. So first I thought I'd mention, like, Amazon right now has a graphite 45mm Series 7 with the graphite Milanese loop for $460. That's brand spanking new, okay? So this is basically the same price as what you'd be paying for an aluminum Series 8, which again has hardly any spec differences or design differences over the Series 7. And because the Amazon one is brand new, you're getting a 100% battery health, crystal clear glass that will age incredibly well, plus basically the biggest display you can get on an Apple Watch. But if you're willing to go the eBay refurbished route, which comes with a 30-day return window, a 1-year warranty, and it comes from a top-rated seller, I've been able to find some silver 45mm Series 7 steel watches for sub $400, which is an incredible deal. But you're taking a bit more of a risk with the used aspect of it, I get it, so that's why I'm comparing it to the Series 5, because this still has a design that is modern enough. You know, it's not super ugly like the Series 3, which I'm sorry, no matter how cheap focused we get on this channel, I'm not gonna recommend anybody get a Series 3 or older. It's got the 32-bit architecture, and it's not even getting watchOS support anymore, so that's not up for debate to me. But why the Series 5, you may ask, and not the Series 4? I thought it would be fair to level the playing field, because even though I'm not a big fan of having an always-on display, I think I'm kind of the oddball out there. Most people like having always-on displays with their watches. The Series 5 has that, the Series 7 has that, so no matter which one you go with, you'll have the option of a display that is on perpetually and still getting watchOS support. This will likely get watchOS 10, 11, maybe 12. Considering the Apple Watch Series 3 got about 5 years of software support, I expect the Series 5 to get at least 5 years, maybe more, because it's on a 64-bit architecture, whereas the Series 3 was on 32. So to me, there's a good chance that this will still be getting software update for years to come, and like I've talked about in previous videos, with things as basic as Apple Watches, there's not a ton of features they bake into every single watchOS upgrade. A lot of them may just only qualify to newer watches, so whether or not you get the watchOS update, it doesn't really matter. So I don't think you should prioritize how many years of software support you'll get too much, but Series 5, in my mind, is still not that old. So you can find those on eBay refurbished with the steel option for sub $200. So on average, I'm gonna ballpark that you can find steel Series 7s for between $350 and $450 on average. It's gonna depend on when you're watching this and all that, but with the Series 5, I would say on average you're looking at between $180 and $280, depending on the condition, where you're looking, and what steel Series 5s are available. So you can save $200 basically right off the bat by going with a 5 over a 7, and we should probably just address from the beginning, what do these watches have in common? What do you get regardless of which one you pick? Because that actually makes the Series 5 feel like a much better deal. For one, both of these still have Bluetooth 5, and because I'm encouraging you guys to get the steel options, that means they'll all have LTE. None of them will have 5G, thank God. Both of them will have the ECG, which you won't get on an Apple Watch SE, so you can take an FDA-certified electrocardiogram on your wrist. They both have heart rate sensors, which are good at detecting irregular heart rate patterns, which have been known to even save people's lives by alerting them of their heart not performing properly. Both of them are water resistant to up to 50 meters. Both have the always-on display. Both have a digital crown. Both have Apple Pay, and both have a peak brightness of about 1000 nits. And because they're an always-on display, that means that they have variable refresh rates. Both of them go down to 1 hertz. According to Apple, both of these have about the same battery life, but ultimately that's probably just going to come down to the battery health status and how you use your watch. Like, literally, the type of watch face you select will consume more power if it's a more motion-heavy or vibrant watch face with all of the pixels turned on, versus a more basic minimal watch face. It won't kill your battery as quickly. But now let's get into some of the upgrade differences, and depending on what your budget is and what you're looking for out of a smartwatch, you're gonna have to decide for yourselves if the extra $200 you may have to spend on a Series 7 is worth all of these features. So for one, Series 7 is rocking the blood oxygen level sensor. So this periodically will just be checking you throughout the day for how much oxygen is in your blood. But it's not certified in the same way the ECG is, but in independent testing, most people have said the blood oxygen level sensor is pretty accurate to a medical grade equipment. The main reason I don't think Apple tests it and certifies it is because your wrist is just not a great place to test your blood oxygen levels. But in my experience, I've never run into a scenario where it's been very useful or helpful. Maybe if you're known for having sleep apnea and that kind of thing, when you're tracking your sleep at night with your Apple Watch, that could be a bit more beneficial. But again, if you really have been diagnosed with sleep apnea, you probably should be using more official equipment, not just some Apple Watch, because this equipment is not like medical grade. So that's kind of a niche example, and that's partially why I'm not bringing up the Apple Watch Series 6 in this video, because it's basically just a Series 5 with a blood oxygen level sensor. But the other bigger difference that I think you'll notice with going to a Series 6, or again, it's only $200, considering the Series 7, is the processor. So I know it's a smartwatch, and we're not playing games on our watches or using Final Cut Pro on the Apple Watch all too much, but I was curious if there was any kind of real world differences in the performance between these two watches, between the S5 chip on the Series 5 and the S7 chip on the Series 7, because for the most part, Apple typically doesn't ship big chip improvements on Apple Watches. They tend to just kind of repackage old chips and rebrand brand them as new, but with the S6 chip, there was like what Apple claimed to be a 20% performance boost. Now, what does that actually translate to in your day-to-day usage? In my experience, not much. Like, I've been launching apps and comparing Apple Pay and how quickly apps can open and that kind of thing, and I did not see any noticeable difference between the Series 5 and the Series 7. Even if there was a slight advantage to the Series 7, I don't think it's worth considering or giving credit to it for that extra $200 it may cost you, but I will admit one thing that might come up a bit more frequently than just opening apps and using the watch as a general little smart computer on your wrist is the boot up time. Most people don't completely shut off their watch necessarily, but for some people, especially if you're using watches for longer periods, the watch battery may die on them, and the amount of time it takes to recharge the watch / boot it up from dead, or because it's a smartwatch, it deals with software updates pretty frequently. It's kind of interesting to see how long it takes for the S5 chip to install an update versus the S7. So I booted both watches completely off and did a boot up test, and the Series 7 surprisingly booted up within about 34 seconds, which is reasonably quick and probably something I took for granted, but the Series 5 took just over 2 minutes to do the exact same thing. I did not expect the boot up experience to be that drastically different. Now, I don't think that's really a deal breaker for most people, because most of the time when there's a software update ready for your Apple Watch, you can just schedule it to install in the middle of the night and you'll just wake up to a new version of watchOS. But if that's the kind of thing that maybe bugs you, or you're planning on owning this Apple Watch for many, many years, that's where having the faster processor, you know, the S7 chip, might actually start to pay off. If you're imagining those times where you drain your Apple Watch to completely dead and now it needs to boot up from scratch. And on top of that, the Series 7 allows for a bit faster charging thanks to a included USB-C to Apple Watch charge puck. And now I don't really find this too useful because I tend to just charge my watches on my Apple Watch charger overnight. Some of you who do more of the sleep tracking stuff might appreciate this because you may be just looking for a time of the day to take your watch off, like when you're taking a shower or when you're sitting at your desk. And at that time of day, you drop your watch on the charger, and depending on how quickly it can charge up to 100%, that's how quickly you can go back to wearing it and tracking your activity or tracking your workouts and calories and just using it as a general watch. I wouldn't say it's like night and day difference though. It's still going to take some time because it's an inductive charger, so it's not breaking any kind of charging records. It's not going to be just drop it on the charge puck and 5 minutes later you're ready to go, which is why I wouldn't say it's a deal breaker by the Series 5, but still just something I thought we'd be aware of. And now we can address the obvious. Okay, yeah, there's a big design difference, in my opinion, between these two. Some of you may just think, digital crown, sign button, it's all the same thing, but I personally think the thinner bezels on the Series 7 are incredibly noticeable, and it makes the display just that much easier to read information. And honestly, because the Apple Watch is probably the smallest computer you're going to be using on a day-to-day basis, this is why I think having the biggest display possible and the thinnest bezels possible is actually a really good reason to opt for it, because it allows you to shrink the text more and fit more information on the display all at once. So much so that Apple, in kind of this weird biased way, enables a QWERTY keyboard on the Series 7, which they do not enable on the Series 5, which I still take issue with because, for one, let me just say I love the QWERTY keyboard and I use it on my Series 7 all the time, and downgrading to the Series 5, I absolutely noticed it not being there. You only have Scribble now, and you cannot type with Scribble as quickly as you can with the QWERTY keyboard. But Apple lets you have the QWERTY keyboard on the 41mm Series 7, but they don't let you have it on the 44mm Series 5. I think it's one of those software things where they're just like, hey, you can have this new feature because you're new, but you can't because you're too old. It's like not a screen size argument because this display is still bigger than the 41mm Series 7. So I don't know what their logic is with that, but definitely a little bit anti-competitive in nature. But regardless of how they do it, I still absolutely find the QWERTY keyboard very useful, very beneficial on the Series 7. Allows me to type so much faster and just lets me keep my phone in my pocket and not have to bring it up all that much because I can type on the watch almost as quickly as I can type on my phone. It's impressive how well Swipe is able to read my finger. So in my opinion, that's a feature that I use on a daily basis, mostly because my Apple Watch is a notification management system before anything else. If you're looking for a great reason to opt for the Series 7 over the Series 5, to me, the display is one of the biggest ones because it's just something that you're going to notice and, in my opinion, appreciate every time you look at your watch. And the bezels on the Series 5 are not bad by any means. They're livable. I'm not going to critique them as much as I critiqued the Series 3 or Series 2 bezels, which are just so so dang chunk, and the corners aren't even curved, so that's not up for consideration to me. But they do look super futuristic, and I personally don't think they're going to be able to shrink the bezels on the Apple Watch much more than they already have. So even if you're buying a secondhand or Amazon Apple Watch Series 7 for cheaper and it's got those thinner bezels, it's basically going to look identical to the Series 8, which if you wanted the steel version of that, it's going to cost you like close to $800. And it will probably look identical to the Series 9. As someone who follows the leaks and the rumors very closely for Apple hardware, I can tell you there's not much rumored for the Series 9 to be a big design overhaul or anything. If anything, maybe the Apple Watch Ultra will get some thinner bezels, but it's still going to be a big chunk watch, so it's not going to be as thin or, in my opinion, as beautiful as this design is, and making sure that you get it with the sapphire glass and the steel is your best way to preserve it and make sure it lasts a long time without getting a lot of scratches and scuffs. So those, I would argue, are probably the biggest reasons or the best reasons to opt for the Series 7 over the Series 5. And if neither of these are good enough for you, yep, then I'll probably default to saying the Apple Watch Ultra is your best bet. Ultimately, it's been fun going back to the ceramic, but I've decided that because I use that QWERTY keyboard so much, and because I got a somewhat used condition version of the ceramic Series 5 on eBay refurbished, I'm gonna go ahead and return this one. It's been fun to review, and I've never had like an extended ownership experience with the ceramic watches, but now that I've had it for a couple weeks, I've discovered that it's very difficult to get the white chassis to really match with that many other watch bands other than just the white sport band. Plus, the seller I bought it from, it still had a passcode lock on it, so I had to make sure it wasn't stolen and all that. And when I brought it up to the seller, their first reaction was not to factory reset it, they just wanted me to return it right away. So it's not like they're not comfortable with me returning it in the first place, but it was a cool experience to get to try out eBay certified refurbished and figure out how this whole return process works and to verify with you guys that it is a reliable system. So I feel more trustworthy now recommending you buy eBay refurbished, and that your money will be refunded if they try to scam you, or you have 30 days to return it, which is twice as long as you have if you buy it from Apple. And it's been a very educational experience for me as well, like figuring out that if your battery health dips below 80% on your Apple Watches, which may happen to some of you who are considering buying secondhand, Apple will actually swap out the entire unit if you pay the $80 for the part replacement. That's without a warranty, without Apple Care or anything. And they'll claim that it's just a battery swap, but in reality, they're just gonna take the watch you have and replace it with a certified refurbished one, or one that they have in stock, which is practically new. Or if they don't have any in stock because your watch is too old, they'll probably even upgrade you to a newer one, which I've seen in some cases, people trying to get old MacBook Airs replaced, and Apple just saying, you know what, have a new M1 MacBook Air because we have that in stock and we don't have your old one in stock. So because I wasn't quite sure after talking with Apple support if I would get a brand new ceramic Series 5 once I replaced the battery health, I might get like an equivalently spec, like they might offer me an Apple Watch Ultra, or they might offer me a steel Series 8 or something like that. I was like, this is just a bit too risky of an investment, and I'd be willing to downgrade my watch if it cost me nothing, or if I make money off of selling the old watch. But in the process of trying to sell my old watch, I couldn't find any buyers for it that would actually cover the price of this one. So that's where I draw the line, essentially. Like, I will pay money to upgrade, but if I'm downgrading, I want to break even or make money. I won't pay extra money necessarily to downgrade. That's where I think this starts to get a bit more into the collector's item space, but I'm still going to keep trying to sell my Series 7 and then maybe considering downgrading to a Series 5 later. But I got to admit, after wearing this for a couple weeks and then switching to the Series 7, this thing is downright gorgeous. I love the bezels, I love the display, I love the QWERTY keyboard, and I think the graphite contrasts well with multicolored watch bands as well. So now you guys have been caught up and you're in the sport loop, and I hope you find a watch out there that works best for you. So thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. Seriously, helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos. So thanks again. This is your absolutely pure. I'll see you all in the next one.